All right, let me just check the stream and the audio levels, y'all. Let me know if the audio is good. Sometimes YouTube is, you know, doing the funny stuff, so let me just make sure the stream is actually live, even though it says here is live. All right, that's good. I'm actually live, y'all. I'm actually live. There we go. Cool. Cool, man. I hope everybody's doing good today. Um, Shit. In these times, I might add, these are some very funny times. I have not been with folks in a minute. 2 seconds. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. It's been tough for a lot of people these times, and you know, things aren't guaranteed. So, also myself, I've been watching the news, checking the news. Just well, let me see here. Is the audio here? Is the audio good? Okay, it should be good. If you notice that the audio is not functioning right or something is out of pocket, please let me know. Let me see there. Okay, it should be good. So let me pause this one. Now, the news is real serious. Obviously, you guys know that things are on Trump time. It's like an alternative universe of facts and information and solutions. Obviously, there's a lot of alternative solutions. I would call Trump the alternative solution because I don't see I don't see how he's a solution at all to anything. I see him as being more of a problem. And I may as well start this off by letting folks know what I have observed, just communicating with some Americans, different places, but also some Americans from my hometown, Washington, D.C. But not all. I'm talking about, don't get me wrong, DC is largely it's a democratic stronghold. Most people understand that housing, healthcare, education would be very nice to have. It should be a priority to for everybody. Elder care and things like that. But because DC is a town of activists and activism, and I grew up in that town, born and raised in that town. You know, freedman Freedmen's, hospital, which is Howard University Hospital today. Um, I grew up in that city, so I know I come from a very active, politically active family myself, and politically active community myself. My father was an activist. My mother was an activist. There, and so on and so on, and friends and family and community members. I mean, that's what it is. That's what it is in DC. If you're active, you're going to be active in a lot of things. If you're just making money in DC, if that's all you're concerned about in DC, if that's all you got the time to do in DC, then you're pretty under the bar in DC. Pretty much. That's living under the bar because most people understand that politics goes hand in hand with business. Politics goes hand in hand with opportunity, access, in everything, not just business, but business also. But it also, has a lot to do with access to education. That's a big issue when you pay federal dollars. You don't always get that money back to improve things on the state level. And DC has always had obstructions like Donald Trump. I mean, DC is not a state in the sense that it's self-governing. We are a state. We pay state taxes, that kind of stuff. But as far as the federal part of it, the federal government has always meddled in Washington, D.C. local affairs, period. If you try to do something that you think is best for the community at that time, the federal government, meaning Congress or the Senate, has often blocked it, right? So Washingtonians have always lived under that, and now Americans are starting to know what that's like. They're starting to feel what that's like. For the first time, A lot of Americans, sadly enough, my observation has been don't really know their rights in the first place. So if you take some rights from, I'm not talking about Washingtonians now, I'm talking about generally. So if you take their rights from them, a lot of them don't even recognize it or wouldn't be against it because they don't realize how the rights affect their daily lives. They haven't gotten that far in it. So that's the general background. But back to the conversations I've been having, there's a fringe group, and this fringe group is across the United States. It's symptomatic of the current political situation. We have people that don't really primarily care about healthcare, don't really primarily care about housing, don't really primarily care about elder care or education. And they're putting other things number one. And what I mean by that fringe, and no pun to these people, because again, I grew up in an activist city. What happened this election cycle? Let me give you an example. Hispanics, that have moved to the country, immigrants, that are first generation, maybe second generation, a lot of them voted against their own best interest. Palestinians in America, largely, just like a lot of Americans, Americans that should know better, voted against their best interest, meaning they didn't put housing, health care, education top of the list. They didn't put elder care top of the list. No, they put foreign conflicts at top of the list, meaning Palestinians put, for example, the Israeli-Palestinian crisis. And so I wanted to start off with that. The crisis is older than me. I'm 55 years old. That crisis is older than me. There's folks online that's 6 years older than me, 8 years older than me, and they put that at number one. I'm talking about folks from my own community, quote unquote, Black Americans. Now, this is a fringe. So we know that there's others that have the same political thing going on. It's okay to empathize with what's happening, but what about Haiti? You know what I mean? And I want to remind Americans, particularly this kind of fringe group, there's loads of problems in the United States, and there's loads of people that come from all over the world that come from families, come from communities that are experiencing hardship that you never fucking ever heard of because it doesn't make the fucking newspaper. And those people count too. But these people are smart enough to know they need health care too. These people are smart enough to know they need a house to live in too that's affordable in the area where they can get to it and go to work. Who needs to spend an hour each way traveling, or an hour and a half or 2 hours just to make a wage that can put them in a house so they can, or a home or an apartment? Who needs that? You need an apartment that's close to where you work. You need health care. These are things that if you're serious about work, if you're serious about family, these are things you definitely need. And a lot of these Americans didn't vote that way, right? They voted towards something else. And that made the difference. Now, I, for one, believe the election was stolen from Kamala Harris. I don't believe that bullshit about Trump. I believe he projects when he's talking about the election was stolen. No, you know that the election, why do you keep saying the election is stolen every time you win? Trump has thought every election was stolen, and then he wins. And then now this is the time where all of a sudden nobody wants to talk about that. Yo, the election was stolen. If it could be stolen for you twice, then it could be stolen for Kamala Harris, the female candidate of another color. It could be stolen for her too. And I don't think Americans put their foot down enough on that. So it's okay. Everybody choose their priority. But I just want to let people know that I'm going to live on the wild side. Just like folks are have these one issues that they put above all the other issues, some crises in another country. And no pun intended, I have empathy. Let me go to that Palestinian thing. I've been an activist for Palestinians being freed from apartheid and having their own state before a lot of people that I see online were born. You see, But I'm a realist. I know that Palestinians and Israelis do not largely care what you think. They have a problem with each other, and this problem is older than I've been alive. If you're 60 years old, the problem is older than you have been alive. So I don't make that my top priority because I know these groups of people don't necessarily listen all the time to what you might think. And I also know that that happens to converge with not just the United States foreign interests, but China's foreign interests, Russia's foreign interests, and every other superpower, major economy's foreign interests. Those things intersect with that conflict too. So let me just put this short. The U.S. can pull out of supporting, no matter what the U.S. does, whether they support Israel or don't, no matter whether they support Palestinians or don't. Let me tell you, if you don't, somebody else will come in there and fill that vacuum on either side instantaneously, because that's a foreign issue. That's about trade in the region. And yes, bad things are going on in that region in terms of human rights. Bad things have been going on in that region, not just Palestine, in the region, not just Israel too, because I wouldn't want to live walking around with a gun every day thinking about a bomb dropping on me. I wouldn't trade that life if I had a choice. But in other parts, Congo, Sudan, Asia, people don't even have the time, people that talk about what's going on in Palestine. And even some people talk about what's going on in Sudan. As tragic as these things are, a lot of these people don't even give a damn about what's going on in conflicts in Asia where people are selling weapons. And no, it is not just one group selling weapons for their own cause. It's multiple groups selling weapons for their own cause because they all want to be there for the victor so they can bag those resources. So having said that, back to the United States and dealing with some of this fringe group that is out there. You know, I think Americans really need to put their foot down and decide what it is are the basics, and stay away from arguments about things that you obviously can't change, right? The United States is still the richest single nation on earth. So you need to understand one thing. There is absolutely no excuse for not having universal health care, not having equal access to education, and not having fair housing. It doesn't matter what your argument is. There is no excuse. Every other Western nation has had that for a generation already or more. So that's just something to think about. So I would encourage Americans to stick to the basics and stick to what absolutely you can change. Absolutely, what you absolutely do need to get along in your day-to-day first. After you think about yourselves, think about the other people. But when you think about yourselves, because we get into the topic here, which is what Trump is doing with the economy and the tariffs and all of this stuff. After you do that, understand one thing. Your well-being is already tied in to your neighbors, to Mexico, to Canada, to the EU trade. You're already embedded with each other. If Trump has tariffs against any of them, let me tell you, the first person that gets hurt in that and the deepest pain will be felt by the American people first and foremost, and no other. You have to understand that. You're not going to beat Canada at this. You're not going to beat the EU at this. Why? Because they will continue to trade tariff-free with each other. So you will be isolated. iPhones will cost $30,000 if you want to make them in the U.S. You know, really. If that's what you want, and that's what Trump is playing around with. Now, regardless, Trump has pulled back some of the tariffs, but understand this. You've still hurt the American people first. You've hurt the American people's pensions because a lot of these pension companies are invested in the stock market, right? you have hurt people just by flip-flopping and flip-flopping and flip-flopping, because people, no matter what, less people are encouraged about investing in the United States. That is what has happened overall. Even if you can get this thing working again halfway or 70%, you will have lost that 20%. You will have lost that 30% of investment, because if American people do not do something about Donald Trump, the rest of the world will never trust your word on anything again. And that will hurt very, very deep. So let's get on to the topic here. And yeah, hope everybody can follow with me. Let me know if you can hear that audio, because to be honest, I can't hear it. It's not. It doesn't look like it's coming through here. 2 seconds. There we go. And a 10%. Let me bring that back. Sorry about that, y'all. Tariff that applies to
those high-profile jobs, and she joins us now for an exclusive interview. Secretary Yellen, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the program. So there has been a collective sigh of relief now that 90-day pause has been announced, not including the 10% tariff. But there is still so much uncertainty about what comes next. The Economist headline this morning reads this: Trump's incoherent trade policy will do lasting damage. Even after his backtracking, the president has done profound harm to the world economy. Do you agree with that assessment?
I completely agree with it. Of course, it was a relief that the reciprocal tariffs that would have affected more than 180 countries, that a pause was placed on those. But still, even if they never go into effect, the US and global economies have suffered a huge protectionist shock. We have enormous, almost prohibitive tariffs on China, which is one of our most important sources of imports. Very substantial tariffs still on Canada and Mexico, on the auto sector, and a 10%
I'm going to pause it right
general
here.
Tariff that applies to.
This is an interesting point that she is making. Trump has tariffs, big tariffs on China. You know, he's going after China. And one has to ask themselves, why? Why is he picking China? And why doesn't he have, following through with this stuff with Russia? You know, he said he wanted to be a arbitrator there. He wanted to negotiate peace, but yet he doesn't have tariffs. You know, he's not tariffing Russia really like that. And but he's tariffing China. Now notice that. Notice the difference. And I would argue that Americans should be very cautious about that. China is a competitor globally in every way, shape, and form. But if you're making decisions based on race, color, this kind of stuff, that is not going to be good. You should be making decisions based on numbers, real, real things that matter, right? Because here's the thing: China is also embedded with trade with the U.S. And embedded is not a one-way thing. Embedded is not just one way. This could have serious effects. Now, I'm thinking that this is more racially induced in Trump's mind. Like, he's a bigot, basically. And whether he realizes it or not, other people are going to trade with China. You know, Europeans are going to keep trading with China. Mexico is going to keep trading with China. Canada is going to keep trading with China. Everybody else is going to keep trading with China. And at this moment in history, not this year, not this month, in your lifetime, right? The U.S., not just the U.S., but the Western homogeny, the Western economy is slowly declining. Slowly. What Trump has done is hit the Western economy more so than any other with a gut blow. And that is not good. He sped it up instead of slowing it down. And that is just the worst thing you could ask for anyone that lives in a Western country. This is like a total attack on your economy because you're the biggest economy in Western nations. So, I mean, you know, now the other ones aren't doing these tariffs towards each other, so they have some grace. They're able to maneuver around the United States, and they are. How much they do publicly is not the same. How much they say publicly is not the same as what they're going to do. But I'm going to tell you, they are more concerned with keeping prices low for their citizens, right? And having things function. And putting tariffs on China is not going to do that, right? They want an integrated global trade. They want the best prices from all the producers that they can. You see, and when you tariff people, you're just screwing up the market. You're especially for the average person, just screwing it up, you know. And yeah, so those of you that invested in the stock market like myself, I would caution you about selling because obviously you're going to take a loss there. My thoughts are, you know, a lot of my investments are in new trade, new energy, things like that haven't been fully rolled out. So those are future investments. Those are I'm investing when the stock is low, knowing that the politics will affect it. So basically, as soon as Trump is gone, you know, I expect new energy to take over. So if you're invested in new energy, I would just hold the course. I wouldn't sell or anything like that. But these other things, you know, hey, who knows? Because there are no restraints on Trump. Now, some politicians may argue that the government is working. Yeah, the government, people are trying. Congress is trying. The people that have good hearts and good minds and want the U.S. to do good and want the American people to do good, they're trying. But overall, it's the American people's job to recognize when their rights are being circumvented. And the Constitution is your right. When he circumvents Congress, he's taking your rights. He's stealing your representatives' power away from them. He's stealing your choice, the people you elected. So, and the same with the Senate. You see, so if you're happy with that, sit down and wait for politicians in Congress and in the Senate to get things done. And also the Supreme Court. You can wait on that if you want. I think those things, those instruments right now are not functioning optimally. And so I would encourage American people to hit the streets. Make some noise. Do not let up the pressure. And I applaud those that have been demonstrating over the last week and before, and people will continue. But let me tell you, this might be a good time for people to clear it up and know that if you haven't hit the streets, your voice is needed. If you haven't, get out there, put pressure on all these politicians, because a political solution may come in 2 years or less. Who knows? But it really does depend on the pressure the American people are putting on their elected officials. No, Democrats and Republicans are not the same. Just get it through your head. And I'm not saying be part of the parties, but I'm saying just look at the representation. Look at what you've gotten. It may not have been everything you wanted before, but it's a hell of a lot better to what you're getting right now. So those of you that, send that message out there, Democrats and Republicans are all the same. My question are you trying to get people to not vote right now, dude? Are you trying to get people to not take interest? Like, get it through your thick head. They're not the same. They might look the same in some cases, but to unilaterally say they're the same, okay, well then you must like what you're getting right now. You did 4 years of Obama, so you want to do 4 years of this if they're the same? But let's get back to what this woman is saying. Janet Helen speaks with CNN.
Most countries around the world, and economists calculate that at this point, average tariff levels are now in the 20 to 25% range. At the beginning of the Trump administration, they were just over 2%. So even if the reciprocal tariffs are abandoned, we have the highest average tariff rate since 1934. And this is going to raise the costs that households in the United States face. One credible estimate that came out this morning that takes into account yesterday's actions estimates a cost to the typical American household of the existing tariffs of about $4,000, which is...
Now, she said $4,000, and this is an estimate by experts. The same experts Trump never listens to, right? But these are for the people that want to listen and want to know what's going to happen to their pockets, or will most likely happen to their pockets, their bank account, right? Now the estimate is 4,000. It was a couple of weeks ago 3,000. You see, but it could be worse. Keep that in mind, because it's an estimate. So don't take that 4,000 or 3,000 as like, oh yeah, I can deal with that. That's okay. That's enough pain. Trump told me to take the pain. I can take that pain. But what if it happens to be 8,000, 9,000, 10,000? Nobody's saying that it can't be. But these are conservative estimates. So just keep that in mind.
Enormous. It'll have a significant impact on the price level and an adverse impact on the United States and on the global economy.
What's up, Donnie? I see
Janet,
you, bro.
one of the things that we were covering a few months ago was the fact that Donald Trump had made several very controversial nominations to lead very serious cabinet positions. However, when Scott Bessent was nominated, there was really this sort of collective sigh of relief on Wall Street, where a lot of people thought, wow, you finally have a grown-up in one of the most important cabinet positions at the White House. Obviously, this man is a very successful hedge fund manager. When you look at what is happening right now, here you have somebody who had the same job as you, somebody as Treasury Secretary, essentially trying to convince the American people that a global trade war would actually benefit them, that it would benefit Main Street. What advice do you have for your successor?
Well, my advice to my successor and to other senior economic officials is that all of them should be explaining to the president why his policies are so damaging to the American economy and why they will harm American workers and households, as well as people around the world. And economists are really in agreement about this. It coincides with the headline that you read to me just a few minutes ago. And they should make sure that the president understands this reasoning, understands what impact it has been having on markets, why it's so dangerous, and that there needs to be a coherent public message about the rationale for tariffs that have been put in place and how the approach that's being implemented achieves those goals. And that hasn't happened. I don't know what's happening inside the Trump administration, but my hope would be that although my successor has been supporting President Trump's approach, that he's giving good advice behind closed doors.
Secretary Yellen, interest rates on U.S. Treasury bonds typically go down during crises like this as investors flock to what they view as a safe haven. That didn't happen this time, and it's reported that that's one of the reasons that President Trump even put a pause on these tariffs. Let me ask you, have foreign investors lost faith, in your view, in the credibility of the United States?
Well, I think they're asking hard questions about the credibility of U.S. policy and what role the U.S. will have going forward in the global economy, whether or not we'll have predictable economic policy and remain a strong, positive global force. And we saw that playing out over the last several days. As you mentioned, normally when uncertainty is so high as it is now, people go to safe havens. They want to be more secure and they buy safe haven assets. And treasuries, U.S. treasuries, are the classic safe haven asset. So you would expect to see treasury yields decline. And when that happens, the dollar would typically go down. But what we saw instead is that yields rose meaningfully, and that this seemed to suggest both the downward pressure on the dollar and the downward pressure on bond prices, that investors were questioning whether or not treasuries really are a safe haven.
Well, and this is
And,
this is
this
a
could
key
be
point
very
right here. You know, the value of the dollar going down is also going to significantly change the value of goods, how much buying power Americans have. That's also a danger. That means everything you buy, everything you trade, everything you do globally now becomes also, that's an extra tax on you for everything you do. And that should be scaring Americans. That's what you call decline. Um, and you could be definitely sure that nobody else that is an ally, and a lot of people may not know who the allies are, right? Because it's not just the EU. These are global allies in trade, conducting trade, that their economies are also affected just by the decline of the dollar, right? Which encourages people to drop the dollar as a trade currency, right? But it also encourages them to align themselves with others like BRICS. So this is not hurting, the competition. This is hurting American citizens, the United States, number one, and anybody else that is embedded or has done any, has deep business ties with the United States, let alone security ties. I don't know why Americans would think they're more safer without intelligence from their allies, coming in about the dangers in the region. I don't know why that would make people feel more safe, but in my eyes, it makes things way more dangerous because part of the United States security apparatus, why it was so strong and why NATO was so strong, is because they all share intelligence with each other about threats. Now, it may not always work as good as it could, but it works far better than any other. Outside of obviously allowing a person that is tied to Russia, Trump, through business and through business in the United States, through the Russian mafia allegedly, washing money through his business projects that always go bankrupt. By the way, that's typically what happens when folks use business to wash money anyway. You bankrupt it, boom, you get that payout, you open a new one. You see what I mean? You get rid of the records. You just keep trying to turn it over as fast as possible. But these are things that Americans, if they haven't thought about, which I'm sure plenty of y'all have, my listeners, because we've been talking about this for a minute. But for the ones that haven't, you may want to be concerned.
Damaging. It caused highly leveraged hedge funds that hold U.S. treasuries to begin to sell their holdings. And that's something that could really begin to trigger financial instability if there is massive sales of U.S. treasuries. So my understanding is that this is something that was an influence on President Trump in getting him to pause the reciprocal tariffs. And it's certainly something that should be of concern.
Secretary, I want to talk about another one of your successors, Jerome Powell. Jerome Powell's term ends in 2026, so in about a year or so. If you go back to Donald Trump's first term, he tried to sort of make very kind of controversial picks for the Federal Reserve Board of Governors, as I'm sure you'll remember, including Stephen Moore, including Judith Shelton. These are people who have very extreme views and are extremely controversial. He failed that time around. How concerned are you on that front if he's able to succeed on some of those controversial picks this time around?
Well, I am concerned because I see the Fed as a tremendous source of stability in economic policy making. The Fed is independent. It prizes its independence. It focuses squarely on carrying out its dual mandate for price stability and maximum employment. And it's been very predictable and I believe very thoughtful and sensible in its policy approach. And this really relies on good appointments of all of the officials who serve on the Federal Open Market Committee. I think that Jay Powell has done an excellent job of leading it. And yes, certainly in the past, President Trump has attempted to appoint individuals with ideas that are, I think, dangerous and certainly not mainstream. But it is a committee that's important. And to be successful, a chairman doesn't dictate policy. A chairman needs to convince other members of the committee to support the chairman's recommendations. And this is currently a committee with deep economic and market expertise. And I think simply if President Trump were successful in replacing Powell with someone who had very non-mainstream ideas, I would really wonder if that person could successfully chair the committee and produce a coherent monetary policy.
What would be the consequences of that? What would be the consequences of that if one of Donald Trump's sort of more controversial picks ended up becoming chair?
I think it might make it quite difficult for the Federal Open Market Committee to act in a predictable way that market participants could understand. Currently, the Federal Reserve's so-called reaction function, how it responds to incoming data to achieve its goals, is pretty well understood by markets. And there's clearly a strong commitment to price stability. Politics don't matter at all in the committee's decision. And this is something that is conducive to good market performance and market stability.
And we've heard Jay Powell say that he plans on finishing out his term as well, despite not so subtle pressure in the form of posts on social media from the president in the last few days that now would be a good opportunity and chance for him to lower interest rates. He has yet to do that. Secretary Yellen, I don't have to tell you that this is a president, this is an administration that has been quite scathing in their assessment of how you and your colleagues under President Biden handled the economy. They constantly bash your work. I just want to play an example.
Now, this is the real sick part about what's going on here. And I don't need to say MAGA, because it's not just MAGA, right? There's other little small fringes out there in the society that claim to be against MAGA, claim to be against all their policies. But if you notice them, they don't focus on what's going on with the economy. They don't focus on the attacks to healthcare. They don't focus on housing, education. They don't focus on what has kept the U.S. strong, right? Because they're also against the U.S. being strong. And what I would say is that a lot of them are getting their talking points from disinformation outlets from Russia. Plain and simple. They have this idea that Russia and China, because they were once communist, is going to do something good. Look, they're capitalistic countries. They are looking to be global powers and to usurp the United States. So, and they have their fingers in conflicts around the world too. So every time you hear someone talk about foreign conflicts and point out the U.S. being involved, keep in mind there's another part. There's the other side to that story. And that is the folks that we might support. There's China and Russia and others supporting the other side with weapons. Just understand that. And they're doing that to keep dominance. They want dominance over trade in those regions. In other words, they want to put a stranglehold on the U.S. And you better believe that, in my opinion, make no doubt about it, regardless of what history has been, and history goes a long time back. It goes back before colonialism, Western colonialism. There was colonialism before that, and before that too. There's always been colonial people going out to their neighbors, overrunning them, taking their resources, making them second-class citizens. That's always been happening since the beginning of time. This is part of the human story, sadly, right? Of course, I'm not saying we shouldn't get out of that, because we should, and sharing is a better way to do things when it can happen. But you're still living in the time where people are racing for dominance. And when the U.S. declines, somebody else is going to step up out of fear, maybe, out of opportunism, maybe, right? Whatever the reason is, everybody always has a reason. You have American exceptionalism, then you have Chinese exceptionalism, then you have Russian exceptionalism, then you have EU exceptionalism. You have all types of African exceptionalism in some ways. You do, right? There's always groups of people, powers, particularly the classical powers, Russia, China, and the Western powers, that have exceptionalism, And in that exceptionalism, they all view themselves as having something special to offer the world that they need a chance to do. They need to run the world the way they want to, so they can show how good they are, in other words. So, yeah, keep that in mind. Let me just let this rock a little bit more, then we're going to switch over to the next one.
Of some of that scathing commentary for you.
Oh, right.
Biden left.
Trump is going to continue bashing Biden, because if the market looked anything, if the situation was anything like this under Biden, Kamala Harris, even though Kamala Harris has never served as a president, Obama, any of these people, if that would have happened, oh my God, the Americans were out there talking about Obama's birth certificate for, I mean, they're talking about Kamala Harris, is her daddy white? That's what a lot of these people were worried about. They're just flip-flopping. There's no comparison. If this would have been Biden, you would have blamed him for everything. You would never accept it if it was Biden. If it was Obama, you would never accept this treatment under them. If it was Kamala Harris, you would never, because you didn't even give her ass a chance. People would never have accepted this. But for some reason, these same people that would never have accepted anything and didn't even accept anything good from Biden, Obama, or Harris can't recognize anything good. They just sitting back as spectators to Trump. They just letting Trump do all of this stuff. What's that about? Is it racism? Is it? I think it is. It may not be a topic people want to discuss, and it's not the only problem out there. It's many, many, many other problems. So I'm not saying is it racism to say that here we go again. It's always racism. No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying this is a clear indication to me, people that are have gender bias support Trump and allow it, even if they don't overtly support Trump, they allow it. They don't want to focus on him. They want to focus on something else, and race or color, ethnicity. I don't know why they think Trump gives a damn about them. Listen to me, MAGA supporters, no matter what your ethnicity is, let me let you know, Trump does not give a damn about you because he's also a classist. He grew up coming out the house, getting in his daddy's limousine every day and watching his daddy throw 5 cents to a homeless person and, maybe 2 cents, maybe 10 cents, and thinking like, I did my part, don't mess with the natural order. If you want to be rich like me, why don't you work as hard as me? This kind of idea. So he's a classist. He thinks regular, everyday people are scum of the earth. He only wants to deal with people that have a lot of money. He don't care if you're a crook or a criminal. Just as long as you seem like you have a lot of money and you're willing to help him make a lot of money and you could do something for him making a lot of money, that's what Trump cares about. And as long as you rub his ego the right way. He seems to care a lot about that, which is why he's always talking publicly about bend the knee. If they bend the knee, bend the knee. Let me tell you, whatever people are doing, they're doing 2 things: what's in their best interest. And if they have to lie to Trump's face at this point to get what's in their best interest, they will. There's no bending the knee. They have learned that Trump talks shit. They have learned that Trump can walk away from a deal being promised, like the one with Mexico, where they said, yeah, we're going to put 15,000 troops on the border, something to that effect. And then after he left and bragged about it, yeah, see, they're going to do this and that tariffs work. Then they said, yeah, but we already doing that. Dumbass, why don't you check the last treaty? Canada said the same thing. So people know Trump is a moron. So let's hear what Trump got to say.
It's a mess. He left us tremendous inflation, tremendously high costs of products. He left us a mess. Right now, we're like a chicken that's being plucked at from all over the world. We're not going to let that happen anymore.
We inherited from Joe Biden an economy
What's the word for today?
in
I see you.
total free fall. There has been 0 jobs growth for American workers in 4 years. In other words, all jobs growth had gone to foreign workers. That is a depression, not a recession. That is a depression for the American worker. We had an economy that was in a state of calamity and catastrophe.
Secretary Yellen, how do you respond to that? Now is your chance to correct the record.
He's not even bothering to tell people the truth. He's depending on you just being a brainwashed person. Just let me believe this guy. I don't need to check any data. I don't need to check with any other sources or resources. I'm just going to believe him because he said it. He said it. So it must be true. And he's an asshole like me. So I'm going to roll with the asshole. That's what a lot of people are saying in their brains, about this. What he said is totally false.
Well, I would point out to you that The Economist magazine described the U.S. economy as the envy of the world. President Trump inherited an economy where growth was very strong. The labor market was functioning very well with low unemployment and outstanding record of job creation, the absolute opposite of the clips that you just played. And inflation, while not yet at the Fed's 2% goal, was coming meaningfully down. And even this morning, we saw a CPI report that doesn't yet contain any evidence of a tariff effect and showed remarkably low inflation getting closer and closer.
What's the word for today? Let me know how things are going over there. I want to hear any news from Americans about how things are happening from the ground, because I know you guys are there on the ground. I'm over here in Denmark as an American U.S. citizen, so I'm seeing things from what's going on over here, a lot of the news and what's going on with the EU, the discussions they've been having in the local politics here in Denmark.
To the 2% goal. So we had a very well-functioning economy, and President Trump has taken a wrecking ball to it.
You're now back to being a professor. I have to ask you, how would you grade how the Trump administration has handled the economy thus far?
I'm afraid I could not give it a passing grade. I'm sorry. I think policy has been, this is the worst self-inflicted wound that I have ever seen an administration impose on a well-functioning economy. It is, if you take the whole complex of Trump policies, tariffs that, as I just said, could cost the average household up to around $4,000 a year. The DOGE cuts in services, whether it's...
If this was happening in a European country, they would have a special election to replace this President Trump overnight. It would already have been done. And this is something American people need to know. Outside of the U.S., politics is not functioning this way. People, number one, have one man, one vote, and then they have persons elected to the parliament, right? From different parties. So there might be multiple, 5 or 6 or 7 main parties, and they work together to decide what's going to happen. And they can have an election very, very fast to replace someone harming their own country like this. They could easily do that. Why it's not happening in the U.S.? I'm sorry. This lies on the American people not putting enough pressure. And I'm not talking about those of you that have been in the streets. I'm not talking about those of you that know what time it is, that are active, that know your voice matters. I'm talking about the other people that have something else they need to do. This is your life. I'm speaking to those people right now. This is your life. This is your vote. This is your constitution, and you have the right to demand your representatives change course and stop this man. If you want him stopped, tell your representative you want him stopped or you're not getting my vote. Send that in. Call that in. Write an email. Say it. Let them know. Put up some posters in your town. Have some town meetings, because this guy is playing with your life like a cat plays with a mouse. He cares not at all. He's not playing with you because he likes you. He's playing with you because he's going to get tired of you soon. And when that is, I don't know. But right now it's just like getting beat up as a boxer in the ring. Like, you're not knocked out yet, but you're getting your butts whipped. And if you allow it, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse.
For our veterans, Social Security, the Internal Revenue Service, the agencies the public interacts with, a spending plan that is likely to involve huge cuts in Medicaid and food stamps that lower income families particularly rely on, all in order to support tax cuts that mainly benefit the wealthy. You had an administration that said it's worker focused, and I really can't think of an overall economic agenda that could be more devastating on every front, from tariffs to cuts in government services to leaving very large deficits, taking policies that will expand the deficit when we need to see exactly the opposite. This is going to be devastating for American households and workers.
And quickly, the likelihood of a recession due to President Trump's economic policies, in your view?
Well, it's clearly risen. And in addition to the tariffs and the negative likely impact on consumer spending, we have a huge uncertainty shock. No one knows where any of this is going. We're now in a huge war with China, and the tariffs that have been imposed on China are what I would call prohibitive. They're going to result in massive impacts on the United States and the global economy. No one knows where these policies are headed. President Trump says he wants to create manufacturing jobs. What firm is going, under these circumstances with this level of uncertainty, is going to undertake a long-lived investment? And the shortage, the decline in investment spending and consumer spending could easily trigger a recession. So I think the odds have meaningfully risen. I wouldn't want to predict we will have one, but I'm certainly concerned about it.
What a difference 3 months make. When you think about what happened when you left office, the US had a strong, resilient economy. Yes, there were inflationary pressures, but it was still strong and resilient. You look at where we are now, bond yields rising, the S&P and the Dow in correction territory. You've got companies like Walmart and Delta who are refusing to issue guidance for the year. And you have JP Morgan saying that there is now a 60% chance of a recession in this country. On top of that, Goldman Sachs saying there's a 45% chance of a recession as well. Janet Yellen, former US Treasury Secretary and former head of the US Federal Reserve, thank you. What an honor. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay.
For joining.
So let's get on to the next one. As far as the effects, right, that it's going to have on the U.S. economy and Americans, it says right here, this is just through ChatGPT, but of course, with ChatGPT, you need to ask questions in various ways, but this is generally the idea. Section 301 tariffs, these tariffs are imposed on over 30 billion worth of Chinese imports, including electronics, smartphones, semiconductors, machinery, furniture, clothing, textiles, metal, steel, aluminum, right? And that's not too good. That affects a lot of businesses, small businesses, large businesses. When was the last time you bought clothes that weren't made in China? I mean, when was the last time you bought a car or a product that didn't need some kind of steel or aluminum products in it? But in any case, rates vary from 75 to 25%. Okay, but this is U.S. tariffs on China. Okay, justification and intellectual property theft, forged tech transfer, and unfair trade practices. Right. So how do you deal with that? And this is Trump dealing with it, apparently. Now, China's tariffs on the U.S., although, and let me go back to the other one, although those tariffs don't just affect, again, because the economies are embedded, they don't just affect the U.S. directly. It has indirect consequences to the other people you trade with. Now, China imposed tariffs of about 110 billion worth of U.S. goods. I don't even think this is the latest tariffs. Key targets, agricultural goods. Look, soybean farmers in the U.S. going to get crushed. Who else wants to buy your soybeans right now? Corn, wheat, pork, beef, crushed. And keep in mind, the in any case, let me just let that be. Automobiles. I mean, again, these are not even just the tariffs that Trump has on people, but automobiles. I mean, what cars? Look at this is the absurdity of it. Even Elon Musk is affected by this. Look, energy, oil. So who's going to buy oil from the U.S.? A lot of times people don't understand how the U.S. is producing record number of oil under the Biden administration, and still does. It produces more oil and gas than anybody else, but it also imports and exports because they're not just producing gas only for Americans, because they want to make money. They want to make more money off of that stuff. So Americans don't buy enough of it and will never make up the excess. That's right. They will never make up the excess. Now, these corporations that sell oil, although they have offshore accounts, they still, have some of their business in the U.S., But in any case, the exemptions. Over years, China has issued temporary exemptions. Yeah. All right, so I just wanted to check that out for a minute. Now, let's go back to the next story, which is Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard, she is a wild one. A lot of people believe she was a Russian asset from the start. And that's one of the things I believe. I believe this administration is full of them. And some of these people might not even be smart enough to realize it, because, look, they all use these little messenger apps that aren't even secure. They're on the average, for the average person, communication, they're secure, but they're not secure against foreign government intelligence. They're not secure against that. They're not secure against what a government wants to find out something, including the United States. They're not that secure. And these people just use it like it's secure. They break all protocols. And here you have it. You got to ask yourself, why would they do that in the first place? Why would they in the first place? I don't understand it at all. My thoughts are they pre-planned it. They're doing it on purpose so they don't have to admit to you that they're sharing foreign secrets. Let me see here. Donnie says, everything is good, brother. Folks complaining about food prices and concerns of Trump tariffs. Okay, that's what's going on over there, down there where you are. Hey, well, that makes sense. I'm glad to have it confirmed. A lot of Americans don't want to share. They don't want to tell people how shit is happening. I mean, look, if you've been to my page, to this, to my profile here, YouTube page, and you've listened to some of the lives, we used to have a lot of people that supported Trump too. I don't hear from those people today. And my thoughts to y'all is no hard feelings, but, admit when you're wrong. It's okay to be wrong. But what makes it really bad is when you can't just get over it and move on. You was wrong about Trump. It's going to cost you. So let's get to the next stage where we rally again the troops, and where we start on where we're going to go now. What's going to happen now? What are we going to do about it now? And I'm sad to say that it doesn't look like some of those supporters are so eager to do that. But hey, that's how y'all do shit. When I'm wrong, I just admit it and get on with the next day. That's what I do. I don't carry it on forever. It's just politics, and it's not all personal. Just because you voted for Trump doesn't mean you're a complete utter idiot like Trump, or asshole like Trump, or misogynist like Trump, or rapist like Trump, or fraud like Trump, or criminal fraud like Trump. It doesn't mean that. It just means somehow you got a little confused and your expectations weren't on point. But let's listen to this. Questions arise over Tulsi Gabbard's potential blah, blah, blah.
Questions raised about the Director of National Intelligence, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, over where she says is her main residence and where she actually voted in the 2024 general election. Months before Gabbard cast her ballot in her home state of Hawaii, Gabbard and her husband declared under oath that their residency in Texas, after buying a home in the Lone Star State and claiming a homestead tax break. CNN's Kyung La examines Gabbard's actions by taking a look at the voting laws in Hawaii and the...
So she's a fraud too. And this should be really concerning, because a petty fraud, if you give them power, all they're going to do is commit petty fraud shit, even on a bigger scale. And this reminds me of that. Like, and of course, she got the magical excuse, y'all. We know where her excuse is going to be. Her excuse is going to be something fictional. Well, you didn't investigate Biden for any of this. You didn't investigate if Kamala Harris did this. How do you know nobody looks into that stuff? Everybody looks into it because it's damn near public records. Taxes are public, pretty much. You have to have a lot of money to hide. But in any case, it's not like people don't know. So even Trump going out and repeatedly refusing to release his publicly doesn't mean that others didn't know and don't know. It's just that, but in this case, they found out she's not Trump and she's going to blame it on Kamala Harris and Biden and Obama. We know that because that is the politics of the USA. If it's not Obama, Biden, or Kamala Harris, they're going to blame it on transgenders, basically, is what I'm saying. Or people crossing the border, even though this topic got nothing to do with none of that, that's what the answer will be.
Property tax laws in Texas.
Months before Tulsi Gabbard was sworn in as a director of national intelligence, in the midst of her transformation from independent to Trump supporter.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
In March 2024, she bought a home in the politically red state of Texas. Soon after, the background on some of her frequent Fox News appearances changed from the slope of Oahu's Diamond Head crater.
You see them out pushing this so-called woke agenda.
To a view of the Texas state capitol.
This is personal for me, this endorsement of President Trump.
A CNN investigation found that Gabbard declared herself a Texas resident, but voted in Hawaii in the presidential election last November. Experts say that raises questions.
So right off the top, we know Trump ain't going to do shit about it, and we know the Justice Department ain't going to do shit about it because these are all Trump appointees who are frauds. They're all frauds. They're all in on the scam. They are following the authoritarian rule book, which is I don't defend the Constitution. I defend the person who is my boss. That's what that is. And if you've ever worked in a company that was full of shit and, had a bunch of crappy managerial problems, where the bosses never take responsibility for anything wrong and just put the burden on the worker, this is what you're experiencing. It's the same type of stuff. People that act like you have no rights. And the dangerous thing is a lot of Americans, for some reason, are magically used to being treated like this. Why else would you accept it if you weren't used to it? I don't accept it. I'm not used to it. I'm the type that will walk out of, if it was like that bad, I would walk out of the job and be like, fuck you, peace, and be out any day of the week. Any day of the week. Because some shit just is not worth it. But here we have people that are elected that really don't think highly of the American people, where they can just go out and say lies over and over again and never have to prove anything, never have to make anything up, never have to prove anything. They will always make stuff up, and they will never provide the data or qualitative value to back up their claims. It's just the magic wand. Biden, Obama, Kamala.
About whether she voted improperly.
Voter integrity is a serious concern and a serious issue.
On the campaign trail for Donald Trump last year, Gabbard talked about
voice.
election security on stage.
I hate her voice. she has that brainwash voice. Voter security is a serious issue, and it's like she sounds so down about it, but not down about the issue, down about the people she's talking to. Like, she's not connecting with the audience in any other way but talking down to people. And I'm a little concerned if you can't recognize that. Like, I'm speaking right now about things that are messed up, but I actually sound cheerful, right? I can connect on some cheerful parts. I can still communicate positively with you. You can leave listening to me, unless you're crazy or have serious mental issues or having a fracture somewhere. You can listen to me and say, hey, this guy's generally a chipper person, generally a happy person, generally a guy who's going about his day. But she don't sound like that. She sounds like all is dead, all is gloomy, and hey, y'all. She doesn't really, when you listen to her, she can't tell you anything about the issue, though. It's bad.
We need to be able to have trust and confidence in the fact that when we cast our vote, that our ballot will be counted in the way that we have cast it.
It's where Gabbard cast her ballot that's the issue here. Gabbard rents a home in Hawaii. She's lived in the Aloha State for many years. In March 2024, Gabbard bought a home in a suburb of Austin, Texas. In June 2024, she and her husband declared under oath that we are residents of the state of Texas, and their Texas home was designated as the family homestead.
In other words, she was gaslighting everybody when she said that the elections need to be fair. She was gaslighting because she knew damn well she had lied her damn self. I mean, how American people, the same people you trusted, they're doing it to you. This administration is doing the things they claim to be cleaning up are actually the things they were the ones doing the entire time. You see? But now they're in power, so they get to do it without any Justice Department doing a damn thing about it, because you elected this dude who would appoint people that will not follow the Constitution and will not follow the law. And they will use the law and the Constitution only when they want to victimize American people. I mean, it's the exact opposite. It's like the relationship between a sex trafficker and a victim of sex trafficking.
And she also claimed a homestead tax exemption on the house. But in the 2024 general election, Gabbard cast her ballot in Hawaii, and that's potentially a problem. Under Hawaiian election rules, an individual can only have one residence for voting purposes. And if the voter has more than one home, there is a presumption that the property that gets the tax exemption is the person's residence. Now remember, Gabbard designated her Texas home as a family homestead months before the general election. What is the problem here?
The problem appears to be that Ms. Gabbard is claiming that she's a resident of Hawaii, that she is eligible to vote on Hawaii races in Hawaii because that's where she lives. And she's also at the same time claiming that she's a resident of Texas.
Gabbard's office tells CNN that she took the Texas homestead exemption as a first step to...
How simple could it be? It's very simple. She knows you can't claim both as your actual residence for voting purposes, but she did it anyway.
Tell CNN that she took the Texas homestead exemption as a first step.
And look at that smile. She just had a smile here. Look at this. She has that grin on her face. CNN. Look at that. Just this blank, I don't give a shit look. No accountability on her face. She has that look.
That she took the Texas homestead exemption as a first step to hiding her address because of security concerns. In a letter to CNN, her attorney said Director Gabbard was, is, and intends to remain a Hawaii resident. That is where she lives, pays taxes, and, of course, votes. Any suggestion that she is no longer a resident because she took the advice of local officials to register a homestead exemption to protect her and her family's privacy is flat wrong, factually and legally.
Who gives a damn who made a mistake, lady? You have to be accountable. and you knew what you were doing. Look, she even burns herself by saying she took the advice. Well, that means you knew. That means it was explained to you. And on top of that, you it's the same agreement they have in Hawaii. It's the same one in Texas. Where does this work for anybody else? You just get to hop around the map and just say, oh, well, I'm going to register my official address here for voting purposes, but hey, I'm going to do it somewhere else too. No, you can't. That's never been the case. So when did she start voting is my question. Like, what's wrong with her? When did she all of a sudden think it was okay? And if she really took the advice, she needs to sue them and prove it first. American people should not give her the benefit of the doubt because, hey, are they going to give you the benefit of the doubt? Is that what happens with you do? I mean, there were 4.5 million people who voted who had their votes thrown out, and it had nothing to do with having two addresses. It had nothing to do with them not being U.S. citizens. We're talking about U.S. citizens here. It had something to do with, the circle wasn't filled in totally complete. You were supposed to circle the circle in complete, not just put a strike on it. Bogus things like that. And then here this lady is voting in two different damn addresses, and she don't know the difference, but yet she has enough competence to do what? Be a department head appointed by the president to head an agency of the United States using federal dollars, your tax dollars. This is at the very least incompetence, utter incompetence, not just with doing her job, but just with being an American citizen. Like, you don't know the rules about voting? What's up with that? And this is her excuse. I took the advice of local officials. Give us a name. Who's the name? Where's the name? Where's the person you're going to sue? Where's the proof? Where's the evidence?
Sometimes there are these disconnects between where you're laying your head most of the time and where you're registered to vote. But it's very different to claim a tax exemption on a primary residence. That's an indication that that's where you really live, and therefore that's where you should be registered.
Very simple.
What's the bottom line here for Gabbard? Well, we spoke with a Hawaiian election lawyer who's handled multiple election residency cases. He says theoretically she could face a challenge to her Hawaiian voter registration, Jake, but someone would have to file that challenge with Hawaii officials.
It did not go well for Donald Trump's top trade representative, Jamison Greer, who testified on Capitol Hill for 2 days under oath.
Let me pause this one. This is the wrong one. I'm going to go back in a second. Yeah, there's been a lot going on. And also the Midas Touch has been reporting on a lot of news. But let me go back here. Big up to the Midas Touch. Let me see here. Are these the two? Right. Now, just wanted to go over that for a second with folks regarding Tulsi Gabbard. Trump ran on a campaign. He ran his campaign on election fraud, you know. Well, he wasn't interested in checking this lady. She supported him in that election fraud. You heard it yourself. You heard her words. Elections should be safe and secure, right? Elections should be safe and secure. But she didn't follow the damn rules herself. She just didn't. And this is bizarre. It's bizarre, but you know, it is what it is. If the American people don't stop this, then it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. And I'm sorry to say that, but it is what it is. People don't have any options, and the main option is if you, American people, don't hit the streets. There's not a quick solution. There's not a quick stop to this. The quickest stop to this is American people hitting the streets. And not just the streets. Hit the Supreme Court. Hit the White House. Right? Hit every Republican's offices. bombard the people that are not doing anything. The Democrats are the minority party, so they can't do anything in the Congress. They can't run the Senate. That's the price of losing an election or being ripped off of an election, both, right? So my thoughts are focus on Republicans. Focus on the decisions being made out of the Supreme Court. Just this thing that's going on where it's like there's only like 3 or 4 Democrats on the Supreme Court and 5 or 6. I forget the exact numbers, but there's a majority of Republicans that let Donald Trump get away with treason in the first place. You know, everything that American citizens are living right now pretty much hinges on the Supreme Court. They are the last battleground. And when they capitulate, you hurt. But that doesn't mean you can't be outside making their life miserable every day. You can. You can. And I'm not saying do anything violent, but I am saying make some damn noise. Let them know also you're not happy with them. Let them know what you think. If you think they're treasonous, let them know that. Hold up those signs, treason, and point out the references in the Constitution while you do it. So let me get on. The next one is Kamala Harris. Now, she's back, and people, there's mixed messages. Me, myself, as I started off saying, I'm voting for Kamala Harris because I notice a lot of other people don't give a damn. They have one issue they will vote over. That's where I started this program with. And so my issue is elect the lady who you stole the election with, and I don't give a damn what else about the rest. You don't elect her, screw the rest. Let's walk on the wild side like the MAGA people. Let's walk on the wild side like the other disinformation, Russian talking point, foreign interest, foreign trade, wars, the people that are concerned about that. Because, again, you ain't concerned about Haiti. So you're not concerned about Native Americans. You're not concerned. One group might be concerned just about their issues, what's happening in one part of the world, and they could give a goddamn about what's going on with another group of people in another part of the world that have it just as bad. West Papua. Anybody give a damn about West Papua? Papuan people? You don't hear a lot about that. What you basically hear is, with the Russian talking points and the main people, and keep in mind, a lot of countries support causes just because it sounds good at that time and they want to be diplomatic, but putting their power behind a damn thing, nah. A lot of them don't. It's bullshit. I hate to say it. They talk garbage a lot of times. And a lot of times they talk the garbage to fool their own people and keep their own voters happy. But when it comes to putting a foot behind something, some power behind something, yeah. An example could be Palestine never looked good for Arab nations. What they going to do about it? Yeah. That's the situation. Sudan's not looking nice. What they going to do about it? Yeah. West Papua not doing nice. What they going to do about it? Yeah. Same thing. So again, back to the main point, focus on what you can do and must do for your life as an American citizen. The fine line that runs through all American citizens, that is education, healthcare, equal housing, equal access to healthcare, equal access to education, equal access to fair housing. Very simple. You get those things right, you'll get the rest of the other things going too. But if you don't get those basic things right, you may as well throw the other shit out the window very fast, because you don't control everything outside of the United States, but you can control what's there. You can fight for trade outside of the United States, but you don't control it necessarily. You got to have a constant effort with that. But in the United States, you control education as an American citizen. The voter does. You control how healthcare works in the United States. The voter does. You control equal housing and access to housing in the United States. You control that as a voter. Use it. 80 million American voters don't even vote in an election, normal elections, federal elections, right? President, for example. 80 million, that's the size of Germany. That's the size of a whole country, let alone gerrymandering, voter suppression. You see? So take accountability for what you want. And of course, it's not all Americans sitting on the ass not doing nothing, and it's not all Americans that aren't falling for that are falling for the disinformation. No, a lot of them, most Americans don't. But there's enough of all of this stuff put together where it has had the same effect. It has immobilized everything. Nothing is working. So if you don't believe your vote works as an American citizen, don't complain. If you don't vote, don't complain. That's what I mean. I'm sorry. Even if you don't think it helps, still vote. Make sure you know it doesn't help, and do it once and more than once. Do it 3-4 times to guarantee that you know what you're talking about. Don't be one of these people that votes every once in a while and then doesn't vote the next time and then come back and start complaining. No. That's not how it works. You got to keep your foot on that pedal, because your protection as a civilian, as a citizen, is in that Constitution. If you don't protect that, you're not protecting your ass at all. And when you don't protect your ass, you're letting someone else do what they think is right for your ass.
One person, when a few stand with the courage, that is the courage exhibited by the leaders in this room every day, to stand, to have the courage to say, I feel fear. The courage to say what is happening is wrong. The courage to say that there is a way that we must chart to get through this. Understanding our power in the democracy we still have if we hold on to it. Courage is contagious.
What could have been, everyone? What could have been?
Right.
That, of course, was...
People, I don't know what kind of people don't really like Kamala Harris. I don't know what people are tired of with Kamala Harris. I think you have an attitude problem yourself. And I think you focus on the wrong things. Everybody is not going to be your cousin, your uncle, your sister, your brother, a person from your own neighborhood that talks the way you want them to talk, eats the kind of food you think is important to eat. And a lot of people have nonsense expectations of Kamala Harris. They may not like the way, they may not think or have seen a person speak like her, or maybe they met a person that spoke like her and that person was full of shit and they just putting it on Kamala Harris. No, she's got the vernacular she's got. If she hasn't done something to you personally, you need to give her ass a chance. And what I hear when she speaks is she's not talking down to anybody. She's talking up. She's expecting that you have the intelligence to listen to what she's saying, the content of what she's saying, and get it. So she's repeating it very plainly. So not just certain types have a chance to get it, but everyone, if they just focus on rationally what she says and focus on what you've experienced, focus on what you've seen, and focus on what you know you need in the United States, you will get it. And I'm afraid a lot of Americans haven't got it, but let's hear some
Former
more.
Vice President Kamala Harris speaking at a summit of women leaders earlier this evening. It's one of the first times we've seen her speak out since her November election loss. She hasn't been out there a ton. We'll see if she comes out more. She also spoke about the current state of fear in our country.
We are seeing organizations stay quiet. We are seeing those who are capitulating to clearly unconstitutional threats. And these are the things that we are witnessing each day in these last few months in our country. And it understandably creates a great sense of fear.
You know, if, you know, the Trump administration, Republicans, they rely heavily on Americans not caring about the Constitution. They rely heavily on Americans not knowing how the law works. Not greatly knowing, not having a large understanding of it, not having a healthy understanding of it, you know. And I think a lot of the disinformation has intersected with that lack of knowledge, but they're telling you the exact right message. She is, anyway, that you can do something about this. And you don't need to capitulate the Constitution, because the Constitution is the law. And what that means is you might read the Constitution and say, oh, well, they don't say anything about this, this, and this. No, but they say something about how laws are drawn. And if the laws are not drawn through the Congress and passed through the Senate and signed by the president, it's not a law. That's what that means. Constitutional law means, and every other law that was formed according to the Constitution. And I think there's a gap there in understanding. So that process has been going on for hundreds of years now. So it's not just the Constitution, it's all the laws that came through the Constitution, which are official laws too. You can't just override them. You can't just stop them. You can't just do what you want about them. You have to vote and have congressional members change the law, and the Senate has to therefore go ahead and approve it, vote on it too, and then a president has to sign it. That's how the law is changed in the United States. And if they want to fight it, you could fight it in the Supreme Court, and that's it. That's the last step. You either fight it there or you don't. But if not, then it's the law. If the Supreme Court says it can't be, then right then it can't be, until you replace those judges that say, oh, no, actually it can be. But it all lies on the American people, and it all lies on others upholding the Constitution. What you're seeing right now is because you have an administration where no one is upholding the Constitution. It's encouraging every other institution to not uphold it. You know, it's encouraging universities, for example, to not uphold the Constitution. Freedom of expression, right? Freedom of speech. It's imposing all types of authoritarian, or it's encouraging authoritarianism throughout the United States, meaning businesses, employers don't have to follow the law, you know, stuff like this. They're telling you that the federal government is not prosecuting bad actors on the federal level. And that could be anybody in the country, any business in the country. They're just telling you they ain't going to do it. Not if it involves their friends. Not if it involves their friends. They ain't going to do it. That means they've already instituted a form of classism, a form of authoritarianism already, you know. And so let's just keep it going.
Because, you know, there were many things that we knew would happen. Many things. I'm not here to say I told you so.
But she did tell you so. Kamala Harris told people so. And let me go back to this. She said she wasn't here to tell you so.
Would happen. Many things. I'm not here to say I told you so.
Right. But I'm happy that she did. I'm happy that she did. And this is the reason why. Because she's a woman living in a country that still has not really recognized what women have gone through in the United States in terms of their rights, equality. So there's no guarantee for tomorrow. There's no guarantee right now. Right now, if there was ever a guarantee yesterday, all those guarantees that you thought you had yesterday, they don't exist in the Trump administration. So there's no guarantee, according to how Trump operates, that the United States is even going to exist in 4 years from now. That's how bad it is. And so I think Kamala Harris and anybody else need to say what they need to say. I told you so. And if you can't take I told you so, you're experiencing some issues with, what's the term that people use? Privilege. If you don't like I told you so from this woman who worked to earn her spot, every job that she's ever had since she got out of college was pretty much a job she had to run for office for, or at least in the last 30 years. She had to run and be elected. She couldn't be picked. She had to have the majority of votes in her state for 30 years to even get to where she is today. Right? The former vice president. People had to vote for that. I don't see why you would be hurt by I told you so. I mean, didn't Trump, he went into office telling people all kinds of shit. You know, he's talking, saying crazy things every single day of the week. If anyone got an issue, including Tim Walz, with what Kamala Harris said, I don't agree. Now I respect Tim Walz. I respect his work ethic, and I respect what he's been able to do for the American people. I got no issue with that. I think he's a great representative. But on that issue about him criticizing Kamala Harris, yo, man, you missed something right there. Tomorrow is not promised to the women of the United States. And I told you so. That was just one little thing. One little thing. Why is that an issue? Do you think it's going to stop voters? I don't think it's going to stop voters. I think there's a bigger problem with voters in the United States. And I think is they don't vote. I think that's the biggest problem. They don't vote. And you have some states, swing states, that are willing to throw out citizens' votes. Your First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech, have to have a say in society. Your voting right, yeah, it's being challenged under the Constitution. They're challenging the Constitution. And I don't think enough Americans stick up for that. And I don't think enough Americans use their vote properly. I think that's what the problem is, due to corporate media never really explaining to people the issues. Corporate media in the U.S. is very passive. Corporate media, for example, has known that most other Western nations have health care for all. No question. It's in the tax system, the same tax system that is comparable to what people in the U.S. pay. Education, free education, same tax system, comparable to the USA. Fair housing, more, or at least more fairer housing, same tax system, So I think corporate media is really at the center of a lot of this for not informing the American people about these kind of things properly, and not just speaking facts, shooting down lies, covering up things that American people should want to know about their country and about the world. So, yeah, that's my take on it. Listen, let me just hear some more about what Kamala's saying here.
First of all, she predicted a lot of these things that were going to happen, and many people are definitely scared. We see that out there. We're also seeing that people are going out in full force to resist, with mass mobilization across the country, including a huge nationwide rally called Hands Off, planned on Saturday. And joining me now is one of the people headlining the rally in D.C., Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is, of course, a Democrat of Maryland, also ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. Congressman, it's great to see you. First, it's been a pretty good week for Democrats, I think. A week where people saw lots of candidates announce they were going to run. You saw Senator Booker do an overnight inspiring moment on the floor. Lots of good things happening in Wisconsin. And you're going to be the headline speaker for the Hands Off rally, as I mentioned, in D.C., with an expected attendance of 12,500 people. We'll see.
All right, so these have already happened. Senator Booker, there's been a lot of, I've heard, again, I'm talking about the fringes. I'm talking about folks on the fringes. I'm not talking about the majority or the main stake Americans that, are active in these dialogues, right? I'm talking about the conspiracy theorist people, the people that are one issue voters, the people that tend to only focus on one thing when there's all kinds of problems, right? Particularly healthcare, they don't focus on that. Housing, they don't focus on that. Health, education, they don't focus on that, right? These fringes, these folks, they don't like Cory Booker because he, there's this thing where people seem to want to throw out, it's disinformation that Israel controls the United States, AIPAC controls the United States. To listeners like that, wake up. Wake up. If that was the case, there's loads of people that have PACs that give political people running for office, that give them money. To think that equals their voting in their interests all the time, you're wrong. Let me give you an example of that. President Obama, he got some AIPAC money too, right? But President Obama did something in his policy that was passed, that went through, Congress supported it. It was an agreement with Iran, which Israel was totally and utterly against from the first moment they heard about it and to this day. But Obama did it anyway because it was in the U.S. best interest, and he thought that would also help bring down tensions in the Middle East. So much American presence doesn't have to be there. Some of it is political, some of it is social, and some of it's a mix of it. And but he made that deal with Iran over the nukes. Israel didn't like that. He went against Netanyahu. So what's up with the AIPAC money? And this is what I mean. Disinformation tends to Americans who are gullible and don't fact check, not just fact check what they're told, but don't just research other stuff outside of that one little thing. You will fall for the disinformation. And President Obama doing the Iran deal, that's one of those instances, and it happens all the time. So those of you that think Israel controls the United States Congress and all of that because they donate money, stop it. That's too lazy. You're being too lazy in your thinking. You're not paying attention to details. Is that good? Is lobbying good? Does lobbying affect things? Yeah, it does. But to take that reality and turn it into these people only vote for the people that give them some money. Are you crazy? That's not what Biden was doing. That's not what Biden did. You see? So these politicians, they get money, but they don't always do what somebody is wanting from them. But that's the game. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be election, some constraints put on that. I believe there should be. But it's another thing to go out there and tell a lie and just make believe that, they control it. What do you think about the U.S. billionaires then? You think they don't have a say in anything? Do you think that Israel is buying their pockets when they got way more money at their disposal? Is that what you think? That doesn't make any sense, does it? No. So stop worrying about AIPAC money because it sounds very anti-Semitic. It sounds like you only care about it because it's Jews. There's all kinds of people throwing money in the U.S. for their business interests. Yes, it's not only AIPAC, and there's all kinds of people inside also. So you got to understand it for what it is and stop trying to take the lazy route. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I'm going to give it a few minutes here. Anything else people want to discuss? Was there anything else I wanted to bring up for today? Let me let Raskin chime out on Kamala Harris and what she said, because he's a constitutionalist. So he is following the Constitution specifically, which is why he would understand what Kamala Harris is saying. But I think a lot of Americans haven't learned that it is about the Constitution. That's the law. It's literally about it.
Where do you see this mobilization effort against the Trump administration policies at this moment?
Well, I was telling everybody back when people were complaining about where's the Democratic leadership, where's the energy, where's the focus, that it takes a while to fully absorb the shock of these events. I mean, we're talking about a full-blown attempt at an authoritarian takeover of our country and a purge of federal workers, and we're being hit on all fronts. But now everybody is in a fighting mood. I am down here in Orlando, Florida, with my buddy Maxwell Frost. He just kicked off his year-long organizing program, and he's the co-chair of Democracy Summer. We're going to be announcing Democracy Summer. We're hoping to have more than 1,000 young people across the country working full-time on Democratic campaigns and studying with great Democratic heroes of the past. The energy is extraordinary. It's astounding. What is this, a Thursday night? There were, 350 people just packed in the firefighters hall, and lots of people couldn't get in. Everywhere, all over America, people understand the stakes now. The entire country, as we know it, is on the line with these people, and they are in a full-blown effort to turn the government into a gangster state. And Donald Trump's doing everything in his power to disable the crime and corruption fighting capacity of the FBI and the Department of Justice, so he can just use it to go after his political adversaries. But meantime, the real corruption is just running amok, and these people are not opponents of corruption, waste, fraud, and abuse, as they keep saying. They are agents of corruption and instruments of waste and fraud throughout the government.
It's interesting.
All right,
I mean,
y'all.
you and I've talked about.
I'm out. I'm going to catch everybody later. I hope everybody has a great week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your loved ones. What's up, Andrea? I know you out there too. Thanks for reaching out to a brother. Everybody else in the U.S., I hope you get it together. I hope you seize the moment.